Cool. So welcome all to another Golang Tools call. I will share the link to the agenda on the chat in case anybody doesn't have it yet, but it's always in the wiki. If you Google Golang Tools wiki, you should find that. So today we've got a pretty light agenda. We don't have anything under meta or ID/editor/tools. Is there anything particularly about GoPlease that we should talk about or mention?
No, nothing in particular. We have big stuff landing on the horizon, which I think I mentioned last time. So that's still on the horizon, but the very near horizon. I have a stack of CLs, which will significantly affect GoPlease's performance characteristics. So significantly reduce memory usage based on using on-disk indexing and on-disk export data. So when that lands, I think there will be some discussion to have with the community around testing. I suspect that unlike past releases, it won't be difficult to get people to test out the pre-release because I think people will be excited to try it out on their mono repos that were basically unusable before. So I'm not too concerned about getting enough pre-release testers, but I am concerned about making sure we have open lines of communication for feedback, and that we sort of get everything in a good place before we do a final release. Basically, a lot has changed, and we think it's a lot better. But there also may be new types of bugs and new performance things that used to be fast that are now slower, and things that used to be slow that are now fast. So it's going to take some time to get out.
Makes sense. I have been updating master at least a couple of times a week, and it continues to work. So far, so good.
Master right now contains a lot of the things that make things slower and none of the things that make things faster yet. So it'll only get better for you. We're basically rewriting all of the features that span multiple packages, so that packages are independent and can be reloaded from disk on demand. So we're basically breaking the global graph of packages that we used to depend on and rewriting all of the algorithms that depended on it. And so we've basically been doing that incrementally, and then the final step is to just basically drop everything from memory, and that hasn't happened yet, but it will soon. So if you're still using master, you're experiencing some of the new implementation, but you wouldn't have observed any of the improvement yet.
I haven't really noticed any change, to be honest. It still works.
Great. Yeah, and a small. Yeah, go ahead.
Is there a summary somewhere of what's actually of the work that's going on, or is it?
Yeah, there's an issue which I can link in the doc. I'll add it to the notes in a second.
Thanks.
Yeah, 57987, and I will put it in the doc. We have an internal design which is a little bit more detailed, but this contains a summary and links to the CLs that are making progress on this.
Very cool.
Yep. The next one, sorry, Dan, I see you just added something else for the IDE. Do you want to move on to that?
Yeah, just as you were talking, I was reminded that I wanted to ask a question, and I realized this could/should be a bug report, but I wanted to briefly mention it in case I'm just holding it wrong. I tend to run NeoVim with GoPlease, and I just leave GoPlease running with the I forget what the flag is called, but you know the flag where it stays alive for a few minutes after I close it. So GoPlease stays. Yeah.
By the way, in the new implementation, you'll experience a lot more benefit from that than you used to. Because most of the remaining in-memory space will be file contents, and those will be shared across sessions. So Vim users should have a better experience with that flag than in the past. But I'm sorry, I cut you off.
No, that sounds great. I pretty much just keep one GoPlease open during the day while I work. But I have noticed something that I do, and maybe it's holding it wrong, is anything to do with modifying GoMod, be it tidy or GoGet or whatever else. I use the command line,
Yep.
so separate from my editor. And I've noticed that, for example, if I add a dependency and then I try to use it in my editor without closing it or anything, without reloading anything, Go Please will shout at me saying that it doesn't know about this added dependency. So
Yes.
what I do is I close the editor, leave Go Please running with the remote auto thing. I reopen my file, and then it works.
Are you using the native NeoVim LSP client?
Yes.
Okay, it doesn't support file watching. So CFC.nvim does, VS Code does, but in the LSP, it's the client responsibility to do file watching. And there's an open issue, the native NeoVim LSP client does not support file watching. So basically, GoPlease is not being told about that change to go.mod, and therefore does not automatically reload for you.
Oh, okay. I
So
figured it must have been, yeah.
It's not a bug per se, but it is certainly a suboptimal experience for you.
So close yet so far.
Well, so there's probably a command to restart the LSP server from NeoVim. So you might want to do that instead of opening and closing and reopening.
Yeah.
But this is one of those things that we don't want to fix for you, because it's really important that the clients manage the life cycle of files. And if a client doesn't want to tell us about a file change, we shouldn't observe it. Yeah. Sorry, did someone raise their hand?
I did. I was just about to ask if maybe we should support some kind of signal to tell GoPlease to reload stuff, but I think what you just said suggests exactly the opposite. So I think you already answered my question.
Yeah, this has been a lesson that we've learned over time, is that there's a reason why the LSP delegates all sort of lifecycle management to the client. And if we try to subvert that, we end up having a bad time.
I fully agree with that. Thanks for the info. I knew that it must have been something on my side, but it wasn't clear what.
Well,
at the end of the day,
it needn't have been something on your side, but in this case, it was.
well, I chose an editor, so I guess I get to live with that choice. So anything else on this section?
Not for me.
Cool. So the next section is command go. The first one that I wanted to briefly mention, even though I already got a reply from Brian, but I just wanted to briefly mention it as an FYI / to see if anybody disagrees. But right now, Go's test cache uses file metadata as part of the cache key, and one of those metadata items is the modified time, and that's after some digging, I realized that was the reason why in some large projects that I contribute to, CI was retesting packages when it shouldn't, because we were keeping the test cache around, and some changes were like just modify the README, right? So none of the Go or test files were being changed at all. And the reason was some test data files were being, so the repo was being cloned from scratch, because that's how GitHub Actions works. And the clone just sets modified times to current time. And then some of the tests were opening test data files. So there you go. The modified time always changes. So in my opinion, if the file is small enough, we should use the contents or hash of the contents as opposed to the modified file, because the part of the code that uses the modified time says we don't use the contents because they may be too big. But if you have the file info, you can tell if the file is too big, right? So I think that's reasonable.
So for what it's worth, there is at least one other case where having inaccurate M times might invalidate cache entries that you would rather not invalidate, which is that the indexing code, the package indexing code that Michael added it, I think in 1.20, might have been 1.19. Anyway, there was a recent addition to index like all of the import metadata for packages as part of Go build. And within the main module, part of that cache key is also the M times. And so if you have M times that are too new, you might end up re-indexing the packages in the main module. Now, granted, most of the time, re-indexing packages is probably going to be a lot faster than running tests anyway, so maybe it's not an issue. But that's another thing to watch out for if your infrastructure has unreliable M times.
And I think an alternative here would be to put it on the user to keep M times predictable, but at least with GitHub Actions, that is quite a lot of effort, and you first have to notice that is a problem to begin with. So I think people will just not do it, and they will just say Go test is slow. So I think that would be unfortunate.
Yeah, for what it's worth, I think like I'm totally fine with hashing small files as a workaround for M times possibly being too new. So.
And it is not a complete fix, because if I have a test data file that is big on purpose, maybe it's like, maybe I'm testing like a compression package or something, then it's back to the same problem. But as long as small is reasonably big enough, like 1 megabyte, I think it's fine.
Does that mean you have to read all files every time you do the check then? Because if you can't check the M times, then that's going to be quite a slow thing. You're going to have to read all files every time you check for something updated, but maybe that's fast enough.
I think, I mean, we could use a 2-layer cache, right? We could cache the hash of the file contents based on the M time and assume that if the M time matches, then the content matches too. And only read the file itself if the M time is actually different.
So I guess in my
I think the failure mode that we're going to see is always the M time is too new by enough to make a difference, and never like, oh, the M time didn't change but the contents did. Like if your M time is the same and your file size is the same and the contents are different, there's not really much we can do about that.
And I think that makes sense for my situation, because if CI reads more files, it's fine. It's already really slow as it is right now. But locally, yes, if the M times don't change, I shouldn't need to read more files than before. The other item I had in this list was about build VCS auto not working in Git work tree checkouts. This is something that Roger spotted a few weeks back. And it goes back to, there was an issue which is linked as a sub item here about somebody saying, I ran go build inside a submodule inside Docker. And the way Docker works is that you only copy a set of files, right? So because this person was only copying the submodule files, and the submodule, the Git directory just points back to the parent, then that symlink like file was broken. So then build VCS failed because it tried to run git log or git status, whatever it does, and that command fails because the Git directory is broken. So the fix that was done there was, if the .git file is not a directory, don't treat it as a Git directory at all. Skip it. Keep walking the parents.
That's not going to work for work tree though, is it?
Correct. So that is the reason why Git work tree doesn't work with build VCS, because in a work tree, the .git file is also a regular file that's a symlink. Contains a relative path back to the original. So I bring this up because Brian and I have been briefly discussing options in the CL, and it seems like we both agree that we should revert that change so that any .git file is treated as the root of a Git VCS, be it a regular file or a directory. And then what about when it's a file, when it's a regular file that points to something that doesn't exist? Then I think we notice Git complaining, and we probably revert back to build VCS, not including VCS info, something like that, but some other fix for the original issue if it's an issue we want to fix. Or we could say, no, if you have a Git directory that's broken, you either should disable build VCS or fix it. That's also an option, I guess.
It's plausible to me. I think if you've got a .git that is broken, then it seems reasonable that you can't get VCS information in general. But the worktree one is really annoying at the moment because I use Git worktree a lot, and so basically if I build a binary in any of my worktree directories, then I don't get VCS information. Damn it.
And because of you, I rediscovered worktree, so now I'm using them again. So now I suffer from the bug again. So thank you.
I really like worktree in general.
Okay, so nobody seems to disagree with that. So moving on. Anything else for command go, by the way? Okay, so last item of mine under miscellaneous. This bug was filed. This proposal was filed for command vet, but I've come to realize that vet is probably not the right place. But essentially, I started using GoDoc links in one of my modules, and I was kind of nervous about it because when I wrote the links locally in my editor, there was no way to tell whether or not the links would work in practice when rendered. Maybe I was getting the import path wrong. Maybe I was writing typos. Yeah, go ahead.
There is a command package site that you can run to test your links.
You mean run package site locally?
Yeah, it's pretty easy. Just run, so install package site, X package site, I think /command/package site, and then just run package site from the module that you're editing.
So
And,
how would I check the links then? Would I like open the docs and then see each rendered link?
yeah, you want
Okay.
something better than that.
Yeah, that's sort of where my proposal is going as well, because so what I ended up doing was push to a branch and then open package site on that commit, which works. It's kind of similar to what you suggest, but then I have to open every single GoDoc that I modified to check. So initially the proposal I had was make vet complain if it knows that one of my links is broken, but vet doesn't really have enough data to tell, especially with cross module links. Like it doesn't have all the dependencies potentially. Sorry, no, I said that wrong. It does have the resolved dependencies, but the links may refer to APIs that were deprecated or deleted, or that haven't been added in the version that I use yet. So I think this should probably be something that the package site does. Well, it already does notice when links are broken, but maybe it should point them out as warnings. So when I open one of my modules, at the module root, maybe there should be like a little tab saying, hey, warning, you've got 3 GoDoc links that aren't rendering properly, something like that. Because it is doing the rendering, right? So it does have all the info, presumably.
My hand is still raised. I'll raise it again. I think I haven't read the issue, so I don't have all the context. I'm a little worried about the implementation in package site because there is a delay before we get new versions, and I'm worried that there might be too much noise from such a check implemented in package site itself, right? It would be better if the thing that does the check were actually able to eagerly fetch versions of the dependency and check to see whether it's available. But you're saying that you want to know if the link works in any version of the dependency?
Well, so this is getting a bit into the weeds. So maybe we shouldn't spend too much time on this. But Timothy King replied on the thread and essentially said that you may link to APIs that haven't been added yet. For example, I may have a link to iofs.fs, but if I run govet on an older Go version, should that complain? Probably not, right? Even if iofs wasn't added back then. And package site sort of has the same problem, but with modules and Go, for example, if it knows that there's a newer version that added that API, it could do better because it has all the versions, whereas vet, locally, I don't have a full, I don't know of all the feature and past versions. Downloading all of that would be too expensive. But at the same time, I don't know what package site currently does with those kind of links that may work in the future or may have worked in the past. But at the same time, it doesn't really matter. Like package site already knows what links didn't render properly. That would be a really good starting point already for me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like whatever it does for rendering, I just want to know which ones failed that logic.
To be honest, it seems to me that GoVet could do a reasonable job here. like it knows what dependencies you've got. It knows what those links look like, or it could know what those links look like. It's like if you pointed to something broken, it should, at least it should be maybe not one of the regular Go vet checks, but something part of that.
Well, I mean, I initially agreed with that because I did file the proposal on vet. I would suggest probably we leave this here, and if anybody's interested, read the proposal and leave a comment.
Yeah.
Because I don't think I can repeat what Tim said properly.
My intuition is that it might make a good non-vet analysis check, because it might be that there are false positives from this, and I wouldn't want to put a false positive in package site because it wouldn't be actionable. But as like a one-off, like I'm about to submit this CL, I want to see if all the links work. To be able to run a custom analyzer would be helpful.
There are lots of Go vet checks that don't get run as part of Go test, though, right?
Correct.
So that
Go test
one of
only
those?
runs vet checks that have like no false positives.
Yeah.
But the threshold for a vet check in general is very, very low false positive rate, and we're even more selective for Go test.
So I believe the last item is Brian's.
Yeah, I just wanted to flag. There was some discussion. I forget what exactly even started the discussion, but there was some discussion a couple of weeks ago about the vet unsafe pointer check being a little bit having too high of a false positive rate. Speaking of false positives into that, and I kind of ended up going down that rabbit hole and looking into a bunch of vet warnings in XSys and discovering a pattern there. So I filed a proposal, and the proposal is basically vet's unsafe pointer check is too noisy. We should rely on the compiler's check pointer checks instead, which are enabled by default when you run under the race detector. And that's basically all there is to it. Like, the static analysis is too noisy. Let's use a dynamic one instead. So if folks have opinions on that, feel free to chime in. It's only really relevant to tools in the sense that it's an example of figuring out the set point between the static checks and the dynamic checks.
This might be a good one to ping Dominic on to see if he has any thoughts. I admit I almost never use unsafe, so I don't really have any thoughts.
How does GoVet know that it's been? Sorry, I might have missed something. How does GoVet know that when the uint pointer has come from something allocated outside of Go?
The short answer is that it doesn't. And so today it overwarns on, like, it warns on uint pointers that do come from outside of Go, which turns out to be a thing that you do encounter when you make cgo or syscall or XSys Unix calls of various kinds.
Okay, so but if you do that, like, it would clearly now not give an error on places that actually are invalid.
That's right. But my hypothesis is that most of the cases that are actually invalid, like the cases that are actually invalid, are where you take a Go pointer and you convert it to a uint pointer, and then you convert that uint pointer back to a Go pointer. And most of the time when that happens, or I should say, essentially all of the time when that happens, the runtime will still know that that address belongs to the Go runtime. And so the check pointer check there, the check pointer check I'm proposing should check whether the uint pointer being converted is actually a Go pointer.
So then you get a runtime error if
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So you would get a runtime error, and for the cases where you're doing something that's actually wrong today, that check pointer check would fire basically all the time, because that Go pointer would still be a Go pointer when you convert it back to a Go pointer.
Yep. Sounds good.
Anything else under miscellaneous? Because I believe that's it for this one. And we've also got a section of for what are people going forward, or anything else that's interesting to share that doesn't fit into any of the categories. I don't have anything this month, I believe. Cool. So next session, going with, again, the 6-7 weeks between meetings flow. I was looking at the 12th of April, which puts us a good couple of weeks before the end of the development cycle. I think that's a good target. I don't believe the 12th of April is anything. It is slightly after Easter, but Easter, at least here, is the 7th and 10th of April in terms of holidays. So I think that's okay.
For what it was, we might well be on holiday that week just because it's easy to take a holiday with bank holiday things, but
it is the Easter school break as well, actually. So the 12th is probably not a good idea. So between the 5th and the 19th, any preference by anybody?
I don't think I can make the 5th, for what it's worth. But please feel free to go ahead without me, but the 19th would be better for me.
Yeah, the 19th is marginally better for me too, but it's not a big deal either way.
It looks like the 19th is towards the end of the school break here, but I still think that's probably as good as it gets. So, okay, let's do 19th then. Whoop. Race, data race. Cool. So I will, if Rob can help me with the recording, I will upload it later, and I will get the agenda tidied up, and we'll see everybody in 2 months.
Bye, everyone. Thanks.
See ya.